Look at the way you eat. You look like a farm animal. My daughter-in-law's words cut through the restaurant like sharp knives. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I'd just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Dorothy Miller. I'm 69 years old, a widow for the last 8 years, and at that moment, I was sitting at a table in the Oak Grill in the heart of Austin, Texas. It was my grandson Tommy's birthday. He was turning 12. On the table, between plates of half-eaten steak and mashed potatoes, I held my fork with trembling hands, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks as everyone stared at me. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, stood beside me. She wore a wine-colored dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair pulled back in a flawless high ponytail, her nails painted a deep, glossy red. Her eyes pierced through me with a disdain so palpable I could almost reach out and touch it. "Didn't they teach you any manners in that small town you came from?" she continued, raising her voice so the nearby tables could hear. "I swear, you're an embarrassment, Dorothy. My family is about to arrive, and they're going to ask who this woman eating like an animal is." The fork fell from my right hand, clattering against the plate with a metallic sound that echoed in the sudden silence. I felt the air grow thick, heavy. The waiters froze. Conversations at neighboring tables died down. Everyone was looking at us. My son, Julian, sat across from me, his crisp, light blue shirt perfectly pressed, the same color as the eyes he inherited from his father. But those eyes weren't looking at me. They were fixed on his phone screen, his thumb scrolling endlessly as if nothing was happening, as if his mother wasn't being humiliated in front of his entire family. "Julian," I whispered, searching for his gaze, for even a flicker of support. Nothing. He didn't even look up. My granddaughter Jenna, who was 15, let out a nervous giggle behind her glass of soda. Her younger brother Tommy, the birthday boy, stared at his plate, the tips of his ears bright red with shame. But he didn't say anything either. Rebecca leaned in, so close I could smell her expensive perfume, the kind I could never afford on my meager Social Security check. "You know what, Dorothy?" she said, her voice lower, but not so low that it couldn't be heard. "You should go eat in the kitchen with the staff. No one would judge you back there." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud noise. Nothing dramatic. It was like the breaking of a dry branch under the weight of years of accumulated snow, silent but final. I placed my napkin carefully on the table, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control them. I stood up slowly, my arthritic knees protesting the movement, a constant companion for the last 5 years. No one moved to help me. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice a thin thread. "I don't feel well. I'm going to the restroom." I walked between the tables with my back as straight as I could hold it, though inside I felt like I was crumbling. Every step was a monumental effort. The murmurs started behind me, but I didn't dare turn around. It was in that moment, just as I was passing the restaurant entrance, that I heard a man's voice, strong and clear. "Mrs. Miller? Dorothy Miller?" I stopped. I turned slowly, my eyes still wet with unshed tears. A man of about 40 stood up from a table near the entrance. He wore an impeccable gray suit with a navy blue tie, and his face was vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it exactly. Behind him, 3 other men in suits also rose to their feet. "I'm Ryan Matthews," he said with a wide, genuine smile, walking toward me with his hand outstretched. "I was your student 35 years ago. You taught me how to read at Lincoln Elementary, do you remember?" My mind frantically searched its archives. Ryan Matthews, the skinny boy with big eyes that all the other teachers had given up on, saying he was incapable of learning, the one who sat in the back row, always with his head down, the one I stayed to help after class, using different methods, with infinite patience, until the letters finally started to make sense to him. "Ryan," I whispered, and a real smile touched my face for the first time in months. "Of course, I remember you." He took both of my hands in his with warmth and respect. "You changed my life, Mrs. Miller. Because of you, I finished school, studied business, and now—" He paused, looking me in the eyes with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "Now I'm the CEO of Escalona Industries. We've just acquired several companies in the state, including the import firm belonging to Mr. Gerald Campbell. The world stood still. Gerald Campbell, Rebecca's father. Ryan continued, oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped in my lap. In fact, I'm here having dinner with my partners because we're signing the final acquisition papers tomorrow. But what a wonderful surprise to see you, Mrs. Miller. You have to give me your phone number. There's something important I need to discuss with you. From my table, about 30 feet away, I could feel Rebecca's stare on my back like hot needles. I glanced over and saw her. Her face had lost all its color. Her lips, once curled in contempt, were now pressed into a thin, tight line. Julian had looked up from his phone for the first time all night, his eyes wide. With pleasure, Ryan, I said, pulling strength from some deep well I didn't know I still had. Here's my number. As I wrote my details on the business card he offered me, Rebecca approached us with quick, almost frantic steps, a forced smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Matthews, what a surprise! She exclaimed in a syrupy voice, completely different from the tone she'd used with me moments before. I'm Rebecca Campbell, Gerald Campbell's daughter. I believe you know my mother-in-law. Yes, I do, Ryan replied with professional courtesy, but without the warmth he had shown me. Mrs. Miller was the one who taught me to never give up. I owe her everything I am. The silence that followed was electric. Rebecca tried to laugh, but the sound came out forced and hollow. How lovely. Well, we look forward to seeing you at the family company soon. Your father is no longer in charge of the company, ma'am. Ryan interrupted her, firmly but politely. As I mentioned, we have just acquired it, but all of that will be discussed in the appropriate meetings. Rebecca turned even paler. Julian had stood up from the table and was now at her side, a confused and worried expression on his face. Ryan gave my hands a final squeeze. I'll call you tomorrow, Mrs. Miller. I have a proposal that I think you'll be very interested in. And please, he added, raising his voice slightly, order whatever you'd like for dinner. It's all on my tab tonight. He bid me farewell with a slight nod and returned to his table, where his partners awaited him with curious expressions. I stood there in the middle of the restaurant, feeling something inside me begin to shift. It was small, barely perceptible, like the first glimmer of dawn that signals the end of the night. I returned to our table without a word. Rebecca and Julian followed me in silence. No one spoke. Tommy's birthday was completely forgotten. That night, when we got home, I feigned a migraine and locked myself in the small back room, the one they had given me when they said the master suite was more comfortable for the younger couple. It was a tiny space, with a twin bed that creaked every time I moved, an old wardrobe with a door that wouldn't close properly, and a window that overlooked the back alley where the trash cans were kept. The walls were painted a faded green, stained with dampness in the corners. It had no dedicated heating vent, and in the winter the cold seeped in through the cracks. But it was my only space in a house I had helped buy. I sat on the bed, holding an old photograph of my husband, Robert. It was taken in Santa Fe on our 20th anniversary. He was smiling with those eyes full of life that diabetes and cancer had stolen from him 8 years ago. He was wearing his favorite hat, the wide-brimmed one he wore every Sunday. Robert, I whispered to the photograph, I don't know if I can go on like this. Outside my door, I heard raised voices. Rebecca and Julian were arguing. Your mother knows the man who bought my father's company, Rebecca was shouting. Do you have any idea what that means? Any idea at all? Calm down, Rebecca. They were just teacher and student 1,000,000 years ago. You don't understand anything. Nothing. The footsteps faded. A door slammed. Silence returned. I lay down on the bed fully clothed, with no energy to change, feeling the weight of 69 years of life on my tired body. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. There was only darkness, and questions I didn't dare answer yet. The next morning at 6, like every day for the past 8 years, I got up to make breakfast. The back room was freezing, and my bones creaked as I sat up. Outside, the city of Austin was beginning to wake with the distant sound of trucks and the barking of stray dogs. I put on the same floral robe I've worn for 4 years, the one with a patch on the left pocket because I can't afford a new one. My worn-out slippers shuffled down the dark hallway to the kitchen. Julian came down at 7:30 in his perfectly pressed gray suit. I had already made pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs, freshly brewed coffee, and squeezed orange juice. Everything was set on the dining room table as if nothing had happened the night before. He sat down without looking at me. He picked up his coffee mug. He checked his phone. "Good morning," I said softly, hoping for at least a nod. "Uh-huh," he replied, not looking up. Rebecca came down 20 minutes later, wearing designer sweatpants and her hair in a high bun. She glanced at me sideways as she opened the refrigerator. "Did you pack the kids' lunches?" she asked sharply. "Yes, they're on the kitchen counter. Don't forget to buy the organic turkey breast today. The one you buy is cheap, and Jenna doesn't like it." I nodded silently. The turkey she wanted cost 3 times what I could afford with my pension. She left without a thank you. Julian finished his breakfast and walked out after her, still glued to his phone. The door closed. The house fell silent. I sat alone in the kitchen, looking at the dirty dishes piling up in the sink. My hands trembled as I washed each one, the cold water numbing my fingers because the water heater had been broken for a month, and no one had called a plumber. As I scrubbed a greasy skillet, memories began to wash over me. Memories I had tucked away in a corner of my heart, trying to convince myself it had all been worth it. I remembered the day Robert died. Julian was 33, newly married to Rebecca for just 6 months. They were renting a small apartment on the north side of the city near his job. After the funeral, while I was still in my black dress and smelled of the wilted flowers from the wake, Julian approached me with a serious expression. "Mom, Rebecca and I have been thinking. You can't stay in the house alone anymore. Sell it and come live with us. We can buy something bigger, all 3 of us together." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a son worried about his widowed mother. And I, shattered by the loss of my husband of 42 years, agreed without a second thought. I sold the Austin house where Robert and I had raised Julian, the house where we took our first steps as a married couple, where we celebrated every Christmas, where my husband planted rose bushes in the garden that bloomed every spring, the house that smelled of cinnamon and coffee in the mornings, where the walls held echoes of laughter and songs. The realtor handed me a check for $150,000. It was everything we had, everything we had built over decades of work. "With this, we can make the down payment on a 3-bedroom house," Julian said as we held the check at the bank. "You'll see, it will be perfect for all of us." And so it was. We found a house in a subdivision called Oak Ridge Estates with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a small backyard. It cost $500,000. I contributed my $150,000 for the down payment. Julian and Rebecca would handle the monthly mortgage payments. We signed. The lawyer explained they would put the house in Julian's name because he had a stable job, and it would make getting the bank loan easier. I trusted him. He was my son, my only son. "But my name will be on it too, right?" I asked timidly. "Of course, Mom. Obviously. You're a co-owner. We'll sort out that paperwork later. We just need to close the deal with the bank first." I nodded. I signed where they told me to, and I waited for the day they would show me the final documents. They never came. I shook off the thoughts as I finished the dishes. The soapy water had left my hands red and raw. I dried them on an old towel and walked into the living room. There, on a corner table, was a wooden box with mother-of-pearl inlay that Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. Inside, I kept my jewelry. There wasn't much, but each piece had a story. A pearl necklace my mother gave me for my 16th birthday. A pair of gold earrings Robert bought me when Julian was born. A silver ring with an amethyst he gave me on that unforgettable vacation in Santa Fe. A 14-karat gold bracelet I inherited from my paternal grandmother. It wasn't expensive jewelry for rich people, but to me, it was worth more than any fortune because it was filled with love and memory. I opened the box as I did every week, just to look at them, to touch them, and remember better times. It was empty. Completely empty. The red velvet lining was still there, but nothing lay on top of it. Not a single piece. Not even the small silver brooch I always considered the least valuable. My legs gave out. I had to hold onto the table to keep from falling. My heart was beating so hard I felt it would burst from my chest. "No, no, no, no," I whispered. checking the inside of the box again and again, as if my eyes were lying to me. I looked in the nearby drawers, under the table, behind the sofa cushions. Maybe I had put them somewhere else and forgotten. Maybe my age was playing tricks on me. But I knew the truth. Someone had taken them. I sat on the sofa, clutching the empty box to my chest, feeling tears stream down my cheeks uncontrollably. They weren't silent tears. They were deep, racking sobs that came from a dark place inside me that had been locked away for years. Robert. My Robert. His gifts. The last tangible pieces of our love. Gone. Why? I screamed into the empty house. Why are you doing this to me? No one answered. Only the silence, that cruel silence that had become my only companion. That afternoon, when Jenna got home from school, I stopped her in the living room. Jenna, honey, have you seen my jewelry box? The one that was here? My granddaughter didn't even look at me. She kept typing on her phone, her earbuds in. Jenna, I repeated, gently touching her arm. She pulled out one earbud with an annoyed look. What do you want, Grandma? My jewelry. Have you seen it? She shrugged. I don't know what you're talking about. And don't touch my stuff. I'm not touching your things. I'm just asking if Mom says you're getting forgetful. That it's normal at your age. You probably lost them. And she walked off to her room, leaving me with the words stuck in my throat. When Rebecca arrived at 6, loaded down with shopping bags from Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus, I waited for her in the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I chopped an onion for dinner, but this time it wasn't because of the onion. Rebecca, I need to talk to you. Not now, Dorothy. I'm tired. My jewelry is gone. She stopped in her tracks. For a second, just a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? But it vanished so quickly I thought I had imagined it. And what do you want me to do about it? This house is a mess. Anyone could have taken it. The cleaning ladies, the gardener, even you could have put it somewhere and forgotten. I didn't. Look, Dorothy, I have better things to do than look for your old trinkets. If they were so valuable, you should have taken better care of them. And she went upstairs, leaving her shopping bags in the living room for me to carry up later. That night, as I was flipping pancakes on the griddle the way my mother taught me, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Miller, this is Ryan Matthews. Is this a good time to talk? His voice sounded warm, kind. The complete opposite of the cold tones I'd been hearing in my own home for years. Yes, Ryan. Go ahead. I'd like to invite you for coffee tomorrow. I have a job proposal for you. We're creating an educational foundation, and we need someone with your experience and sensitivity. I know you're retired, but I accept, I interrupted without a second thought. There was a surprised pause on the other end. You don't even want to know the hours or the salary? I laughed for the first time in weeks. A small, broken, but real laugh. Ryan, at this point, anything that gives me back a piece of my dignity is enough. Then I'll see you tomorrow at 10 at the Daily Grind Cafe. Does that work? I'll be there. I hung up the phone and stared at the griddle, watching the pancakes puff up with the heat. Outside, I heard Julian's car pull into the driveway. Soon, he would come in for dinner, sit in front of the TV, and ignore me like every other day. But something had changed. For the first time in 8 years, I had somewhere to go that wasn't this house. A place where someone valued what I had to offer. And though I didn't know it for sure yet, though I was still afraid to believe it, that phone call had just planted a tiny seed of hope in the desert my life had become. A seed that, against all odds, was about to start growing. The next morning I woke before dawn, my heart beating faster than usual. It was 5:30, and for the first time in years, it wasn't the weight of obligation that pulled me from bed, but something different, something that felt dangerously like excitement. I showered in silence, using the lukewarm water that trickled from the rusty shower head. I put on my best dress, a navy blue one I'd bought 3 years ago at a thrift store. It was slightly frayed at the cuffs, but it was respectable. I brushed my gray hair in front of the fogged-up bathroom mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in months. When had I stopped looking at myself? When had I become invisible even to me? I prepared breakfast as always. Coffee, pastries, cut fruit. I left everything on the table and wrote a note. I have an appointment. I'll be back this afternoon. I offered no explanation. I didn't ask for permission. I just took my worn handbag and left the house before anyone else was awake. The city bus that took me downtown was packed with people on their way to work. I sat by the window, watching the familiar streets pass by, but this morning they seemed different, as if I were seeing them for the first time, or as if I were different looking at them. The Daily Grind Cafe was in the historic district, near the old courthouse. It was a small, cozy place with exposed brick walls and old wooden tables. It smelled of freshly ground coffee and baked bread. I arrived 15 minutes early. Ryan was already there. He stood up when he saw me enter, with a genuine smile that reminded me of the shy little boy who sat in the back of my classroom 35 years ago. "Mrs. Miller," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "It's so good to see you again." We sat by a window overlooking the square. He ordered 2 coffees and some cinnamon rolls. "I want to be direct with you," he began, after the waiter served us. "I'm creating an educational foundation that will focus on children with learning difficulties. Kids like I once was. And I need someone who understands that behind every child who can't read, there's a story no one has taken the time to listen to." His words touched something deep inside me. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I need a pedagogical director, someone to train the teachers, design the programs, to be the heart of this project. And the first person I thought of was you. "Ryan, my voice broke. I'm 69 years old. I retired 8 years ago. I don't know if, Mrs. Miller," he interrupted gently. "I'm not hiring you for your age or your degree. I'm hiring you because when everyone else told me I was useless, you saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. You don't learn that in any university. You either have it or you don't." Tears began to roll down my cheeks without permission. Ryan discreetly passed me a napkin. "The salary is $3,500 a month. Part-time. The offices are right here downtown, and you can start whenever you're ready. $3,500. More than double my Social Security check. Money that would be mine, that no one could take from me or belittle." "I accept," I said, wiping my tears. "I accept, Ryan." We spent the next hour talking about plans, about dreams, about what the foundation could achieve. For the first time in years, my brain felt alive, active, useful. I wasn't just the invisible maid for my own family. I was Dorothy Miller, the woman who had dedicated 40 years of her life to teaching, to planting hope in barren fields. When I left the cafe around noon, the sun was shining so brightly it made me squint. Or maybe it was just that I'd spent so long with my head down, I'd forgotten what it felt like to walk with it held high. I decided not to go straight home. I walked through the downtown streets, seeing my reflection in the shop windows. I went into a bookstore and bought a new notebook, one with a hardcover the color of emerald green. It would be my notebook for plans, for ideas, for the new life I was beginning to build. I got home at 3 in the afternoon. The front door was ajar, which was strange. From the driveway, I heard raised voices. I walked in slowly. In the living room were Julian, Rebecca, and 2 older people I recognized immediately. Rebecca's parents, Mr. Gerald and Mrs. Estelle Campbell. I hadn't seen them since the wedding, 8 years ago. Mr. Campbell looked unwell, his face gray and his eyes ringed with dark circles. Mrs. Campbell's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. "There she is!" Rebecca exclaimed when she saw me. "Where have you been? We've been looking for you all morning." "I was out," I replied calmly, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I left a note." "A note?" Rebecca let out a dry laugh. "Like you're a teenager. Dorothy, we need to talk. My parents are coming to live with us." I looked at Mr. and Mrs. Campbell. He avoided my gaze. She wrung her hands nervously. "There were problems with the company," Rebecca continued. "My father, well, let's just say the transition didn't go as we'd hoped. They lost their house. They need a place to stay. I'm very sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "That must be very difficult for you." "That's why," Julian intervened, finally looking at me. "We need your room, Mom. It's the biggest one after ours. Rebecca's father has back problems and needs space for his orthopedic bed." The silence that followed was as thick as the air before a thunderstorm. "And me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You can sleep on the living room sofa," Rebecca said. Or better yet, don't you have a sister in Florida? You could go stay with her for a few months while we sort this out. I looked at my son, my only son, the child I nursed, whose fevers I soothed, whom I drove to school every morning for years, whom I supported through every stage of his life. Julian, I said softly, what would your father say about this? His face turned red. Dad's gone, Mom, and life moves on. I have to think about my family now. And I'm not your family? You're complicated, Mom. You always have been, always needing attention, always playing the victim. The words hit me like physical blows. The victim? Me, who had sold my home to give them theirs? Me, who cooked, cleaned, and cared for them without a single complaint? Besides, Rebecca added, this house is technically in Julian's name. You only live here because we allow it. There it was. The naked truth. Raw. Devastating. I see, I said, feeling something inside me harden like steel. When do you need me out of the room? Rebecca and Julian exchanged surprised glances. They had clearly expected tears, begging, drama. Well, Rebecca stammered, my parents are arriving with their things in 3 days. So, 3 days. Perfect. I'll have my things out by then. I turned and walked toward my room, the small back room I would soon lose as well. Behind me, I heard confused murmurs. I locked the door and sat on the bed. I opened my new green notebook and wrote with a steady hand, Day 1 of my new life. Today, I got my name back. Tomorrow, I will get my dignity back. That night, while everyone slept, I searched the back of my closet for an old shoebox. Inside were all the important documents I had saved for years. Birth certificates, diplomas, and most importantly, a copy of the original deed to the house, the deed where my name appeared as co-owner. I pulled it out with trembling hands. There it was, my name, Dorothy Miller. Clear as day. Julian had lied to me. Rebecca had lied to me. For 8 years, they had made me believe I had no rights to this house, when the truth was that half of this property legally belonged to me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just tucked the document into my handbag, next to my green notebook of plans. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep with a smile on my lips. Because I finally understood a fundamental truth. They weren't kicking me out of my house. They were giving me the perfect excuse to take it back. The next day, I woke with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was 5 in the morning and still dark outside, but I already had a plan. I got dressed in the same clothes as the day before, took my handbag where I'd placed the original deed, and left the house without a sound. The streets of Austin were empty at that hour, with just a few early workers waiting for the bus. I waited too, but this time I wasn't going to the market for cheap vegetables or to the pharmacy to pick up my prescriptions. This time, I was going to a lawyer's office. Ryan had given me the name the afternoon before, when I called to tell him what was happening. Go see Mr. Morales, he had said. He's the best in family estate law. Tell him I sent you. The office was on a street near the Capitol, in a restored old stone building. I arrived at 7 o'clock, just as they were opening. The young receptionist with glasses looked at me curiously. I'm here to see Mr. Morales. Ryan Matthews sent me. Ryan's name worked like a magic key. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man in his 50s, with silver at his temples and a serious but kind expression. Tell me everything, Mrs. Miller, in detail. And I told him. Everything. From Robert's death, to the sale of my house, the $150,000 I contributed, the promises that my name would be on the deed, to the conversation yesterday when they told me the house was Julian's alone. I showed him the original deed. Mr. Morales studied it carefully, using a magnifying glass to check the signatures and seals. This is very clear, he said after several minutes. You are the legal co-owner of this property. Your son cannot make decisions about the property without your consent, and he certainly cannot evict you from your own home, but he says it's in his name only. Then he is either lying or the deed was fraudulently altered. Both are crimes. I need your permission to request the most recent deed from the county records office. If there are discrepancies, we will proceed legally. I nodded, feeling my hands stop shaking for the first time since yesterday. How much will all this cost? The lawyer smiled. Ryan has already covered my fees, Mrs. Miller. He told me what you did for him when he was a boy. He says he owes you everything. So consider this a way of paying back that debt. Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from something I had forgotten existed. Disinterested kindness. There's something else, the lawyer continued. You mentioned some jewelry went missing. Do you have photos of it? Receipts? Anything to prove it existed? I thought for a moment. Robert always saved the receipts for important things. I searched my memory until I remembered. There was a tin box where he kept all the valuable papers. I last saw it on the living room bookshelf, hidden behind some old books. I think I do have proof. It's at the house. Get it. If we can prove the theft, it strengthens your legal position. And Mrs. Miller? He looked at me intently. I need you to understand something. What comes next will not be easy. Your son and daughter-in-law will react badly. There might be conflict, maybe even threats. Are you ready for that? I was silent for several seconds. I thought about the 8 years of invisibility, the ignored breakfasts, the public humiliations, my stolen jewelry, the room they were about to take from me. I'm ready, I said, my voice firm. For the first time in a long time, I'm ready. I returned home around 10 in the morning. Rebecca was in the living room, on the phone with someone about furniture and decor. When she saw me walk in, she covered the mouthpiece. Where were you again? You're acting like a teenager with all this sneaking out. I didn't answer. I went straight to the bookshelf in the living room. Rebecca hung up the phone and followed me with her eyes. What are you looking for? My things, I answered without looking at her. I found the tin box behind a collection of old magazines. I opened it right there on the living room floor. Inside were all the receipts Robert had saved for years. And there they were, the proof of purchase for my jewelry, my mother's pearl necklace, the gold earrings, the amethyst ring, my grandmother's bracelet, each one with a date, a price, a detailed description. What is that? Rebecca asked, coming closer. Proof, I said, putting the papers in my handbag. Proof that my jewelry existed. The same jewelry that disappeared a few days ago. Rebecca's face changed. The mask of superiority cracked for just a second, long enough for me to see the panic in her eyes. I already told you I don't know anything about that jewelry. You probably sold it yourself and forgot. It's normal at your age. It's also normal at my age to go to a lawyer when you've been robbed, I said, getting to my feet. And that's exactly what I did this morning. A lawyer? Her voice went up an octave. What do you need a lawyer for? To get back what's mine, both the jewelry and this house. This house? This house is Julian's. Your name isn't on any papers. I pulled the original deed from my bag and held it up in front of her. Are you sure about that? Rebecca snatched the paper from my hands and read it, her eyes wide. I watched her face go from red to white in a matter of seconds. This is old. It doesn't count. Julian made changes. Changes without my consent. That's called fraud, Rebecca. She dropped the paper as if it were on fire. You can't do this to us. We're your family. Family? The word came out of my mouth like poison. You called me a farm animal in front of my grandchildren, and now you talk about family? I didn't. I was upset that day. I didn't mean it. And my jewelry? Did you steal that without meaning it too? I didn't steal anything. Then it should be easy for you to explain that to the police when I file the report. Rebecca flinched as if I had slapped her. You're an ungrateful old woman. After everything we've done for you, we gave you a roof over your head, food, with my money, I interrupted, my voice echoing off the walls of the house I had helped buy, with the $150,000 from the sale of the house I shared with my husband, with the pension I spend on groceries that you eat, with the invisible work I do every single day so you can live comfortably. Julian! Rebecca screamed up the stairs. Julian, get down here now. My son appeared in his pajamas, looking like he'd just woken up. What's wrong? Why are you shouting? Your mother, Rebecca spat, is threatening to sue us. She says the house is hers. Julian looked at me, his confused expression slowly turning to annoyance. Mom, what is this? What is she talking about? I'm talking about how you never removed my name from the deed like you promised, I said calmly. I am still the co-owner of this house, and I will not allow you to kick me out of my own property. That deed is old, Julian argued. I made legal changes. I have everything in order. Then show them to me. What? The changes. Show me the papers where I supposedly signed away my share of the house, with my signature, with witnesses, with everything the law requires. Julian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. They're at the bank, in a safe deposit box. Perfect. Let's go get them right now. I can't. I have to work. It's Saturday, Julian. You don't work on Saturdays. The silence that followed was absolute. Julian and Rebecca looked at each other with poorly disguised panic. Mom? Julian finally said, changing tactics. I don't understand why you're doing this. What do you want? Money? We can give you more money each month. I don't want your money. I want respect. And if you can't give me that, then I want you to get out of my house. You're crazy, Rebecca exploded. Completely insane. Julian, your mother has lost her mind. My mind is clearer than ever, I replied. You have 3 days to produce those papers that supposedly exist. If they don't appear, my lawyer will move to force the sale of the property and divide the assets. And Rebecca, I turned to her, I suggest you find my jewelry, because if it doesn't turn up, the theft report gets filed on Monday. I walked up the stairs to my room, leaving them both petrified in the living room. My legs were trembling, my heart was beating like a war drum, but my back was straight and my head was held high. I entered my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and let the tears fall, but they were not tears of defeat. They were tears of liberation. Outside, I heard shouts, slamming doors, more shouts. I took out my green notebook and wrote, Day 2. Today I planted my feet on the ground and said no more. Today I stopped being invisible. And although I didn't know what would come next, although I was afraid of the conflict I had just unleashed, for the first time in 8 years, I felt something I had completely forgotten. I felt I was worth something, that I deserved respect, that my life belonged to me. The 3 days that followed were the most tense of my life. The house became a silent battlefield, where every glance was a reproach and every word a poisoned dagger. Julian barely spoke to me. When we passed in the kitchen or the hallway, he would avert his gaze as if I were a ghost. But I knew it wasn't indifference. It was fear. Fear that everything he had built on lies was about to crumble. Rebecca, for her part, had changed her strategy. The shouting was gone. Now she tried to manipulate me with tears and drama. On Sunday morning, as I was making coffee, she sat across from me with red-rimmed eyes. Dorothy, she said, her voice cracking, I know we've had our differences. I know I haven't been the perfect daughter-in-law. But please, think about the children. Jenna and Tommy aren't to blame for any of this. If you take the house from us, where will they live? What will we tell them? I looked at her without blinking, holding her gaze until she had to look down. Tell them the truth, I answered calmly. Tell them their grandmother sold her home to help them. Tell them that same grandmother cooked, cleaned, and cared for them for years without a single thank you. And tell them that when that grandmother asked for a shred of respect, you tried to throw her out on the street. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Rebecca, and you know it. She shot up from the table, knocking over her coffee mug, which shattered on the floor. Ceramic shards scattered across the kitchen. You clean it up, she screamed and ran to her room. I knelt slowly, my knees protesting, and picked up the pieces one by one. Each broken fragment reminded me of how I had felt for years. Broken, disposable, invisible. But this time, as I swept up the remains, I knew I wasn't like that mug. I wasn't broken. I had only been asleep. On Monday morning, Mr. Morales called me early. Mrs. Miller, I have news. I've received the updated deed from the county records office. I need you to come to my office. It's urgent. I arrived an hour later, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. The lawyer was waiting for me with a thick folder on his desk and a grave expression. Please, sit down. I complied, clutching my handbag like a life raft. Your son altered the deed 6 years ago, he began. He filed documents with the county in which you supposedly voluntarily signed over your share of the property. There is a signature that appears to be yours, and 2 witnesses. I felt the floor drop out from under me. But I never signed anything, I know. That's why I hired a forensic handwriting expert. We compared that signature with the ones on your driver's license, your marriage certificate, and other legal documents. He paused and looked me directly in the eye. The signature is a forgery, Mrs. Miller. Your son forged your signature to take full ownership of the property. The world stopped spinning for a moment. My son, my only son, the child I had carried for 9 months, the baby I had nursed, the little boy who cried in my arms when he had nightmares. That same son had stolen from me. What does this mean? It means he committed fraud and forgery. These are criminal offenses. But before we proceed down that path, I have to ask you, do you want to report him to the district attorney? The question hung in the air like a sword over my head. To report my own son, potentially send him to prison, to destroy what was left of our relationship. Is there another option? Yes. We can proceed civilly. We can reverse the fraudulent deed modification, restore your property rights, and file for a partition sale of the home to divide the assets. But Mrs. Miller, his voice grew more serious, I need you to understand. Your son will not accept this without a fight. He will hire lawyers. He will try to discredit you. It could get very ugly. It's already ugly, I replied. It's been ugly for years. I was just too blind to see it. Then we will proceed. I need you to sign these documents authorizing me to represent you. I signed each paper with a trembling but determined hand. When I was done, the lawyer gave me a copy of everything. Your son will be officially served within the next 48 hours. I suggest you not be alone when that happens. I'm not running from my own house. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to protect yourself. That afternoon, when I got home, I found Rebecca's parents settling into my room. Mr. Campbell and Mrs. Estelle were moving boxes and suitcases into the room that had been my only private space for years. I stood in the hallway, watching strangers occupy my bed, hang their clothes in my closet, place their pill bottles on my nightstand. Rebecca appeared behind me with a defiant expression. I told you we needed the room. You can sleep on the sofa. Something inside me exploded. Not with screams. Not with violence. With a laugh. A laugh that came from the depths of my being, growing until it filled the hallway, the house, perhaps the entire world. What are you laughing at? Rebecca asked, bewildered. I'm laughing, I said between gasps that mingled with tears, because you really thought you could do this to me. Because you thought I was so weak, so submissive, so invisible that I would just accept it. You're hysterical. I'm lucid. For the first time in 8 years, I'm completely lucid. Mr. Campbell came out of my former room, looking uncomfortable. Dorothy, we didn't want to cause any trouble. Don't you worry, Mr. Campbell, I said, regaining my composure. Enjoy the room. It won't be for long. I went downstairs, took my blanket from the living room sofa, and settled in right there. Jenna and Tommy watched me from the dining room with wide eyes, as if they were seeing a stranger. I barely slept that night. Every noise in the house kept me on edge. I heard whispered conversations upstairs, footsteps pacing back and forth, doors opening and closing. At 3 a.m, Julian came downstairs. I pretended to be asleep. I heard him rummaging through drawers in the kitchen, shuffling papers on the bookshelf. He was looking for something, probably documents he thought could help him, but I had already taken everything important to Ryan's for safekeeping. When he finally left, I opened my eyes in the darkness. The living room was cold and the sofa was uncomfortable, but something had changed. I no longer felt like a victim waiting for the next blow. I felt like a warrior preparing for the final battle. On Tuesday at noon, while everyone was eating in silence around the table, there was a knock at the door. Julian got up to answer it. I knew who it was before I even heard the voice. Julian Miller? Yes, that's me. I have a court summons for you. Please sign here. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian came back to the dining room with a large yellow envelope in his hands, his face completely pale. What is that? Rebecca asked. Julian opened the envelope with trembling hands. He read in silence. His eyes darted from left to right, faster and faster, growing more desperate. Julian, what does it say? My son looked up and met my gaze with an expression I had never seen on him before. It was a mixture of disbelief, rage, and fear. She's suing me, he said in a hoarse voice. My own mother is suing me. Rebecca snatched the papers from his hands and began to read aloud. Petition to reverse deed due to signature forgery, restoration of property rights, partition sale of real estate. What is this? Everyone stared at me. Mr. and Mrs. Campbell with horrified expressions, Jenna with her mouth hanging open, Tommy with tears in his eyes. I stood up slowly, holding my teacup with steady hands. It's justice, I said simply. It's what happens when you step on someone for so long you forget they have teeth. You're a snake, Rebecca screamed. A backstabbing snake, after everything we've done for you. What have you done for me, exactly? My voice was soft but sharp as a razor. Stolen my money? Forged my signature? Humiliated me in public? Taken away the last little corner I had left in this house that I helped buy? Mom, Julian intervened, his voice sounding different, frightened. We can fix this. We can talk. You don't have to do this. We had 8 years to talk, Julian. 8 years where you chose not to see me, not to listen to me, not to respect me. Now, the judge will do the talking. You're going to end up alone, Rebecca shrieked. Completely alone. No one will want anything to do with you. Your own grandchildren will hate you. I looked at Jenna and Tommy. My granddaughter glared at me with contempt, but in Tommy's eyes, I saw something different. Confusion, perhaps. Or maybe the beginning of understanding. I'd rather be alone and dignified, I said, than surrounded and destroyed. I left the dining room, placing my cup on the table. I grabbed my handbag and walked out of the house. Outside, the sun was shining with an almost painful intensity. I walked without a destination, just needing air, space, distance from the explosion that had just occurred. I ended up in Zilker Park, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. I took out my green notebook and wrote, tears streaming down my cheeks. Day 5. Today I declared war, and even though my whole body is shaking, even though I'm scared of what's to come, I know it was the only choice, because a life without dignity isn't a life. It's just existing, and I don't want to just exist anymore. I closed the notebook and looked up at the sky through the tree's branches. Robert, I whispered, I hope you're proud of me, because I'm starting to be. I spent 3 hours in that park, watching families pass by, children play, elderly couples walk hand in hand. Each scene reminded me of what I had lost, but also of what I never truly had, a family that valued me. When I returned home as evening fell, I found the front door locked from the inside. I knocked several times. No answer. I could hear voices, movement, but no one came to the door. Julian, I called, knocking harder. Open the door. Finally, the door opened a crack. Rebecca appeared, a cruel smirk on her lips. Sorry, Dorothy. This isn't your house anymore. Julian's lawyer says that while the lawsuit is ongoing, you have no right to be here. What? I felt the blood rush to my head. You can't do that. I'm a co-owner. A judge will decide that. In the meantime, your things are out here. She pointed toward the yard. There, thrown onto the damp grass, were my belongings. My clothes piled haphazardly. My shoes scattered. A few framed photos, my books, my blanket, everything that had been my life for 8 years, reduced to a heap of abandoned objects under the darkening sky. You can't do this to me, my voice broke. We just did. And if you don't leave now, we'll call the police for trespassing. The door slammed shut in my face with a final hard thud. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there, on the lawn of the house I had helped buy, staring at my possessions scattered like trash. The sky had turned gray and threatened rain. If I didn't gather everything soon, it would be ruined. But my legs wouldn't respond. My entire body was paralyzed by the magnitude of what had just happened. They had thrown me out. They had literally thrown me out onto the street. I pulled out my cell phone with trembling hands and dialed the only number I could think of. Mrs. Miller, are you okay? Ryan's voice was full of concern. No, was all I could say before I burst into tears. I'm not okay. Where are you? I'm on my way right now. I gave him the address between sobs. 20 minutes later, his SUV pulled up in front of the house. He got out, his expression turning to fury when he saw my things strewn across the lawn. They did this? He asked. pointing at the mess. I nodded, unable to speak. Ryan took a deep breath, visibly controlling his anger. Then he took out his phone and called someone. "I need you to come over with your truck. Now. And bring boxes." He hung up and turned to me. "Don't you worry, Mrs. Miller. We'll get everything packed up and I'm taking you to a safe place. I don't have money for a hotel." "You're not going to a hotel. You're staying in the guest apartment at my house until this is resolved, and I'm not taking no for an answer." I'm not taking no for an answer. Half an hour later, with the help of 2 of Ryan's employees, we had gathered all my belongings and loaded them into 2 pickup trucks. As we worked, I saw curtains twitching in the house's windows, faces peeking out but lacking the courage to come out and show themselves. When we finished and I was about to get into Ryan's truck, the front door opened. Julian came out, a conflicted expression on his face. "Mom, wait." I stopped, feeling a spark of hope. Maybe he'd realized. Maybe he was coming to apologize. "I need you to leave the house keys." The hope died as quickly as it had been born. I took the keys out of my handbag, the same keys I had used for 8 years. I held them in my hand for a moment, feeling their weight, their meaning. "Here," I said, tossing them to him. They landed at his feet. "But Julian, someday you're going to understand what you lost today." And it wasn't the keys. I got into the truck without looking back. Ryan drove off in silence, respecting my need to process what had just happened. Ryan's house was in a residential area north of Austin, in a quiet, gated community with beautifully manicured gardens. It was a modern 2-story construction with large windows and a white stone facade. "The guest apartment is on the ground floor," he explained as he helped me out. "It has its own entrance, a small kitchen, a full bathroom. It's completely private." The apartment was small but cozy. It had a living room with a comfortable sofa, an equipped kitchenette, a sparkling clean bathroom, and a bedroom with a queen-sized bed covered in white linens that smelled of fabric softener. "I don't know how to thank you," I started to say. "You don't have to thank me for anything, Mrs. Miller. You taught me that people are worth their kindness, not their bloodline or their last name. Now let me pay back even a fraction of what you gave me." The employees brought in all my boxes and set them in the living room. When they left, I was alone in that strange but safe space, surrounded by my packed-up life. I sat on the sofa and let the tears flow. I cried for everything, for the lost years, for the son I had raised who had become a stranger, for the family I never really had, for the house I helped build and from which I had been thrown out like a dog. But through the tears, I also felt something else. A strange relief, a feeling of liberation, like when you take off a shoe that's been hurting you all day. I no longer had to walk on eggshells in my own home. I no longer had to cook for people who didn't thank me. I no longer had to be invisible. That night, I unpacked the essentials and took a long bath in the clean tub with plenty of hot water, without rushing, without anyone knocking on the door demanding I hurry up. I put on my most comfortable nightgown and slipped between those clean sheets. The bed was soft. The room was warm. Outside, I could hear crickets chirping in the garden. And for the first time in 8 years, I slept through the entire night. The next morning, I woke up disoriented. The light was coming through a different window. The sounds were different. For a moment of panic, I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. I was no longer in that cold little room in the back. I was in a place where I was welcome, where I had value. Someone knocked softly on my door. "Mrs. Miller? I brought you some coffee and pastries. I'll leave them out here." It was Ryan's voice. I heard his footsteps walk away, respecting my privacy. I got up, put on my robe, and opened the door. There, on a small table by the entrance, was a tray with steaming coffee, fresh muffins, cut fruit, and orange juice. There was a handwritten note. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Today your new life begins, and it's going to be wonderful, I promise. R." I brought the tray inside and ate my breakfast slowly, savoring every bite. I didn't have to rush to make breakfast for anyone else. I didn't have to clean dishes that weren't mine. I didn't have to pretend everything was okay. After breakfast, I got dressed and took out my green notebook. It was time to make a plan, a real plan for my life. I wrote, "Things I need to do. Move forward with the lawsuit. Do not back down. Start working at Ryan's Foundation. Reclaim my purpose." Look for my own apartment when I get my first paycheck. Make peace with my past, but do not return to it. Learn to live for myself for the first time in 69 years. As I was writing, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Grandma? It was the voice of Tommy, my grandson. He sounded scared. Tommy, are you okay? Yeah, I'm calling you secretly. Mom and Dad don't know. What's wrong, sweetheart? I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not saying anything when Mom was mean to you at the restaurant. For never standing up for you. I was scared. The tears started rolling down my cheeks again. It's not your fault, Tommy. None of this is your fault. Dad says you're being mean. That you're taking the house away for revenge. But I don't believe that. I know how they treated you. I saw everything. And what do you believe? There was a long pause. I believe you were braver than all of us put together. Something in my chest bloomed. A flower in the desert. Thank you, Tommy. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. I have to go. But Grandma, can we see each other sometimes? When this is over, even if it's a secret, when this is all over, and if you want to, I would love to see you. I love you, Grandma. And I love you, sweetheart. So much. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone, feeling something that had been broken inside me begin to heal. Not everything was lost. There was still love. There was still hope. That afternoon, Ryan knocked on my door again. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Morales wants to meet with us tomorrow. He says he has important news about the case. Good or bad? Ryan smiled. From the sound of his voice, I'd say very good. That night, before going to sleep, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I really looked at myself. I saw the wrinkles around my eyes, the completely white hair, the age spots on my hands. But I also saw something else. I saw strength. I saw dignity. I saw a woman who had been dead inside for years and was finally waking up. Hello, Dorothy, I said to my reflection. It's a pleasure to meet you again. And for the first time in decades, I smiled at myself. A real, honest, free smile. Wednesday morning was crisp and clear. I woke up early, not out of obligation, but with anticipation. Today I would find out what news Mr. Morales had. I dressed carefully, choosing a beige dress that Robert had given me years ago, and that I rarely wore because Rebecca always said it made me look older. Today I wore it with pride. I brushed my hair and even put on a little lipstick I found at the bottom of my purse. Ryan picked me up at 9 o'clock sharp. On the way to the office, I noticed he had a thick folder on the back seat. What's that? I asked. Information I had someone look into. You'll see. Mr. Morales was waiting for us in his office with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it satisfaction? Concern? He invited us to sit. Mrs. Miller, I have several things to report. Some are good. Others are complicated. My stomach tightened. Let's start with the good, I said. The handwriting analysis definitively confirmed that the signature on the deed modification is a forgery. We have irrefutable proof. Furthermore, the witnesses listed on that document do not exist. The names are fictitious. That strengthens your case enormously. And the complicated part? Your son has hired an expensive law firm. Very expensive. They're arguing that you verbally gifted your share of the property years ago, and that the modification was merely a delayed administrative formality. They are also suggesting that you suffer from age-related memory issues and don't recall giving your consent. I felt rage rise from my stomach to my throat. That's a lie. My mind is perfectly clear. I know, and we will prove it. But I need to warn you that they will try to discredit you in every possible way. They will bring up every mistake, every weakness, anything they can use against you. I have nothing to hide. I hope so, Mrs. Miller, because in a trial, everything comes to light. Ryan, who had been quiet until then, opened his folder. Mr. Morales, I also brought this. He took out several documents and placed them on the desk. I hired a private investigator to look into the finances of Julian Miller and Rebecca Campbell. The lawyer took the papers and began to read them. His eyebrows rose higher and higher. This is interesting. What is it? I asked. Ryan looked at me before answering. Mrs. Miller, your son and daughter-in-law are in significant debt. Maxed out credit cards, unpaid personal loans. They even owe money to several of Rebecca's relatives. And there's more. 4 months ago, they tried to refinance the house to get cash out, but the bank denied them because the property's equity wasn't enough to cover what they were asking for. What does that mean? It means, the lawyer interjected, that they desperately needed money, and the only way to get it was to take full ownership of the house so they could sell it without your consent. The pieces started to fall into place in my mind like a macabre puzzle. That's why Rebecca had been in such a hurry for me to leave. That's why they needed my room for her parents, to make me so uncomfortable that I would leave on my own. That's why they had forged the documents. The jewelry, I whispered. That's why they sold my jewelry. They needed the money. Exactly, Ryan confirmed. The investigator found that Rebecca sold several pieces of jewelry at pawn shops 3 weeks ago. We have the receipts. I felt sick. They hadn't just stolen items of sentimental value. They had sold them to cover their own vices and poor financial decisions. This changes everything, the lawyer said. With this information, we can demonstrate there was a premeditated plan to strip you of your assets. It wasn't just an administrative error or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate fraud. So what's next? Now we present all this evidence to the judge. We request an urgent hearing, and Mrs. Miller, he looked at me seriously, prepare for a battle, because when your son sees that we're about to win, he's going to get worse. We left the office with more information than I had expected. Ryan invited me to lunch at a small restaurant nearby, but I could barely eat. What are you thinking, Mrs. Miller? I'm thinking about how I could have been so blind. The signs were there all along. Rebecca's excessive spending, Julian's expensive suits, the vacations they took while I barely had enough for my medication. It was all a facade. You aren't blind. You're trusting, and you trusted the wrong people. That's not a flaw, Mrs. Miller. It's a virtue that was taken advantage of. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. It makes you human. Nothing more. Nothing less. That afternoon, back in the guest apartment, I tried to read a book but couldn't concentrate. My mind kept replaying everything I had discovered. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it was local this time. Mrs. Miller? Yes, who is this? This is Patricia Ruiz from Lincoln Elementary. I don't know if you remember me. Of course I remember you, Patricia. We were colleagues for years. Exactly. Well, I just heard about what's happening with your son. News travels fast in this town, and I wanted to call you to tell you something. Go on. You were the best teacher I ever knew. The most dedicated. The kindest. The one who never gave up on any child. And if you had the courage to dedicate 40 years to teaching all of us to have dignity, then you have my full support in what you're facing. I circulated a letter among the former teachers from the school. We all signed it. It's a character reference letter to present to the judge if you need it. Tears began to stream down my face uncontrollably. Patricia, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know that you are not alone. There are 20 of us who signed that letter. 20 people who know your quality as a human being. And if you need us to testify, we will. When I hung up, I sat on the sofa, hugging a cushion, and I cried, but not from sadness. I cried because I had discovered something I had forgotten for years, that I had built more than just a family of blood. I had built a family of hearts, people who remembered me not for my last name, but for my actions. The next few days passed in a haze of legal documents, meetings with the lawyer, and preparations for the hearing. Ryan kept me busy with work at the foundation as well. He introduced me to the teachers who would be on the team, showed me the facilities they were setting up, and asked for my opinion on educational programs. For the first time in years, I felt useful, valued, seen. A week later, the lawyer called me urgently. Mrs. Miller, I need you to come to the office right now. Your son wants to negotiate. Negotiate? Yes. His lawyer has requested a mediation meeting before going to trial. He says Julian wants to reach a settlement. And what do you think? I think we should hear what he has to offer. But do not accept anything that doesn't leave you in the position you deserve. The meeting took place 2 days later in a conference room at Mr. Morales' office. I arrived with Ryan, who insisted on being there for moral support. Julian came in with his lawyer, a man in an impeccable suit with a calculating expression. My son looked haggard, with deep dark circles under his eyes and disheveled hair. He avoided my gaze. Julian's lawyer spoke first. "Good morning. We are here because my client wishes to avoid a long and painful court process for both parties. He is prepared to offer Mrs. Miller financial compensation in exchange for her dropping the lawsuit and signing documents permanently ceding her share of the property." "What compensation?" Mr. Morales asked. $25,000. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. $25,000? I repeated, feeling indignation burn inside me. For a house that's worth $500,000, for which I paid more than half the down payment. It's a generous offer considering the circumstances. Circumstances? I stood up from my chair. Are you referring to the circumstances where your client forged my signature? Where my jewelry was stolen? Where I was kicked out of my own house like a dog? Julian finally looked up. "Mom, please." "Don't call me Mom. You lost that right when you decided your mother was worth $25,000. I need that money." His voice broke. "We're drowning in debt. If we sell the house, we can start over. Please, for the kids." "For the kids? The same kids who watched you humiliate me and learned that's how you treat a grandparent. Those kids? Mom, I'm begging you. No." My voice was firm and clear. "The answer is no. I will not accept scraps for something that is rightfully mine. I will not bail you out of your financial irresponsibility by sacrificing my dignity one more time." Julian's lawyer tried to intervene. "Mrs. Miller, if this goes to trial, everything will become public. Your son's debts, yes, but also every mistake you've ever made in your life. Let it all come out," I interrupted. "I have nothing to hide, do you?" The lawyer exchanged a look with Julian. "Then we'll see you in court," he said, gathering his papers. "See you in court," I confirmed. Julian stood to leave but stopped at the door. "You're going to lose your family over this." "No, Julian. I lost my family years ago. I was just too busy serving them to notice." They left. When the door closed, my legs finally gave out, and I had to sit down. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked the lawyer. "You did the right thing, and we are going to win this case, Mrs. Miller. I promise you." That night, in the solitude of my small apartment, I took out my green notebook and wrote, "Today I said no to the last handout they tried to give me. Today I chose justice over a false peace. Today I understood that some losses are actually blessings in disguise. If I lose people who only kept me around to use me, then I lose nothing. If I gain my freedom and my dignity, then I gain everything." I closed the notebook and made myself a cup of tea. Tomorrow was my first official day of work at the foundation. A new life was beginning, and for the first time in 69 years, that life was completely mine. My first day at the New Hope Foundation was like waking from a decades-long dream. Ryan had set up a small but bright office for me, with windows overlooking a courtyard where purple bougainvillea grew. On the desk was a nameplate, Dorothy Miller, Pedagogical Director. I touched the engraved letters with my fingertips, feeling their texture, their permanence. I wasn't Julian's mom, or the mother-in-law, or the maid. I was Dorothy Miller. Me, with my own name and a title I had earned. The first few days were overwhelming. There was so much to do: design educational programs, train teachers, assess the needs of the children who would soon arrive. But every task filled me with energy instead of draining me. It was work with purpose, with meaning, with recognition. In the third week, I met Samuel. He was an 8-year-old boy with enormous, frightened eyes who had repeated the second grade twice because he couldn't learn. His parents, a young working-class couple, arrived with expressions of complete defeat. "The teachers say he's lazy," his mother explained, "that he doesn't pay attention, that he'll never learn to read properly." I sat with Samuel at a small table, away from his parents' gaze. I showed him a book with colorful illustrations. "Do you like dinosaurs, Samuel?" He nodded shyly. "Me too. You know, I had a student many years ago who couldn't read either. Everyone said it was impossible. But do you know what I discovered?" "What?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That his brain was special. He saw the letters in a different way. He wasn't broken. He was just different." And when we found the right way to teach him, he learned. And today, he's a very successful man. Samuel's eyes lit up just a little. Really? Really? Will you let me help you find your special way of learning? We worked together for an hour. I discovered that Samuel had dyslexia, something no one had ever diagnosed. The letters danced before his eyes, confusing him, making him feel stupid when he was actually brilliant. When his parents came back to pick him up, Samuel was smiling. "Mom, I read 3 whole sentences. Mrs. Miller has magic tricks." I saw tears in his mother's eyes. His father shook my hand firmly. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." But I did know. I knew exactly how much it meant because I too had been invisible for years. And now, I was being seen. A month after the lawsuit was filed, Mr. Morales called me for the first formal hearing. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I had rescued from my belongings, and arrived at the courthouse with Ryan by my side. The room was cold and smelled of old paper. Julian was already there with Rebecca and their expensive lawyer. She shot me a look of pure hatred. He didn't look at me at all. The judge, a man in his 60s with a stern expression, reviewed the documents while we all waited in tense silence. "Mrs. Miller," he finally said, "do you confirm that this is your signature on the original property deed?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you recognize this other signature as yours?" he asked, holding up the forged document. "No, Your Honor. That is not my signature. I never signed that paper. Are you willing to undergo medical examinations to verify your mental competency?" "Completely willing, Your Honor." Julian's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client maintains there was a verbal agreement years ago. Mrs. Miller suffers from age-related forgetfulness." "Objection," Mr. Morales interrupted. "We have multiple witnesses who can attest to my client's exceptional lucidity and memory. Furthermore, the handwriting analysis unequivocally proves the signature was forged." "I will review the expert's report at the next hearing," the judge ordered. "In the meantime, I rule that Mrs. Miller has the right to visit the property with a legal escort to retrieve any additional belongings that were left behind. Mr. Miller may not prevent her entry." I saw Julian clench his fists. Rebecca whispered something furious in his ear. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am ordering an updated appraisal of the property and a full report on the financial situation of both parties. Next hearing in 3 weeks." We left the courthouse with a small victory, but I knew the worst was yet to come. A week later, I used the court order to visit the house. Mr. Morales accompanied me along with a court officer. When we knocked on the door, it was Rebecca who answered. "I've come to pick up a few things I left behind," I said in a firm voice. She stepped aside without a word, but her glare could have killed. I walked into the house that had been my home for 8 years. Everything was different. The furniture had been rearranged. There were discolored patches on the walls where pictures used to hang. The place smelled of burnt food and disarray. I went straight to my old room. The door was open. Rebecca's parents were there, sitting on the bed, looking uncomfortable. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I'm just here for something I left." Mr. Campbell stood up. "Dorothy, we didn't know about any of this. The forged papers, the jewelry. Rebecca told us you had decided to leave on your own." "I know, Mr. Campbell. You are not to blame." I knelt beside the wardrobe and searched in the far corner. There, hidden behind a loose floorboard that only I knew about, was a metal box. I pulled it out carefully. Inside were more photos of Robert, letters he wrote me when we were courting, and an envelope with cash I had been saving in secret for years. $500 in old bills. My secret emergency fund that no one knew existed. "Is that everything?" the court officer asked. "Yes, that's everything." As I was leaving the room, I ran into Jenna in the hallway. My granddaughter looked different, thinner, tired. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and pain. "Grandma." "Yes, Jenna. I'm really sorry for what I said that day. About you being forgetful. Mom told me to say that." I stopped. I really looked at my granddaughter for the first time in months. "Your mom told you to say that?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "She told me that if I made you look bad, you would leave us alone, that it was for our own good. But I didn't want to. I never wanted you to leave." Something inside me broke and mended at the same time. "Jenna, listen to me carefully. You are not to blame for any of this. None of this is your responsibility. You're just a child caught in the middle of adult problems. Do you hate me? No, sweetie, I could never hate you. I hugged her. She clung to me like a life raft in the middle of the ocean. I felt her tears soak my shoulder. I have to go, I whispered. But this isn't forever. Someday, when you're older, you'll understand everything. Rebecca appeared at the end of the hall. Jenna, get away from her! My granddaughter quickly pulled away, wiping her tears. I'm leaving now, I said, clutching my metal box to my chest. I walked out of that house without looking back. But something had changed. Jenna had chosen, if only for a moment, to be honest. That was something. That night, in my apartment, I opened the letters Robert had written to me over 40 years ago. His slanted handwriting, his words of love, his promises for the future. In one of them, written shortly before our wedding, he said, "My dearest Dorothy, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know that as long as you have your strength and your kindness, nothing can truly destroy you. You are stronger than you think, my love. Never forget that." I closed the letter and held it to my heart. I didn't forget Robert. I just needed years to remember. 2 weeks later, on the day of the second hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with a certainty I hadn't had before. Mr. Morales brought the handwriting expert's report, the documents on Julian's debts, and the letter signed by 20 former teachers testifying to my character and lucidity. Julian arrived looking even worse than the last time. Rebecca didn't come. His lawyer seemed less confident. The judge reviewed all the evidence in silence. Every page, every document, every photo of my sold jewelry that Ryan's investigator had found. "Mr. Miller," the judge finally said, "do you have anything to say in your defense before I issue my ruling?" Julian stood up. For the first time in this whole process, he looked me directly in the eye. I just wanted to give my family a good life. Things got out of control. The debts grew. Rebecca kept spending, and I didn't know how to stop her. I thought if I could get money from the house, I could fix everything. I thought," his voice broke, "I thought my mom would understand, that she always understood, that she always forgave, that she always saved me. But forging a signature is not asking for help, Mr. Miller," the judge said sternly. "It is stealing. Do you understand the difference?" Julian lowered his head. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge closed the folder with a sharp thud. "I will issue my judgment in 1 week. You are all dismissed." We left the courthouse in silence. Ryan took my arm. "It's almost over, Mrs. Miller. Almost." "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I'm not afraid of the end. Because I had learned something fundamental in these months of battle. The end of something painful isn't a tragedy. It's a liberation. And I was ready to be free. The longest week of my life passed in a blur of work at the foundation and sleepless nights waiting for the judge's verdict. Every day I woke up wondering if this would be the day Mr. Morales would call with news. At the foundation, Samuel had made incredible progress. He could now read entire paragraphs using the special techniques we had designed for him. His mother cried with happiness every time she came to pick him up. "You gave him his confidence back," she told me one day. "Now he believes in himself. You can't put a price on that." Her words stayed with me during those days of waiting. I, too, had needed someone to give me my confidence back. And that someone, ironically, had been my own son by showing me who I didn't want to be. On Thursday afternoon, as I was reviewing lesson plans in my office, my phone rang. It was Mr. Morales. "Mrs. Miller, the judge has issued his ruling. I need you to come to the office." "Did we win? Please come. I want to explain everything in person." The drive to the office felt endless. Ryan insisted on coming with me, closing the foundation early to be there. We didn't speak on the way. He respected my need for silence. When we arrived at the lawyer's office, he greeted us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Please, sit down." He pulled out an official document with the court's seal. "The judge has ruled in your favor on all counts, Mrs. Miller. The deed modification has been declared null and void due to forgery. Your co-ownership rights have been fully restored. Furthermore, he has ordered the forced sale of the property and the equitable division of the proceeds between you and your son." I felt the air return to my lungs after months of not being able to breathe fully. "Really?" Really? But there's more. The judge also ordered your son to pay a compensation of $10,000 for the stolen and sold jewelry, plus interest. Rebecca Campbell is being investigated for receiving and selling stolen goods. Criminal charges may be filed against her. And Julian? The judge was lenient. He could have pressed criminal charges for forgery, but since you did not request them, he only ordered civil restitution. Your son is lucky to have a mother more generous than he deserves. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Ryan squeezed my hand. You won, Mrs. Miller. You won everything. But strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, because winning meant it was all over. That the last connection to my son, even one of legal conflict, was about to be severed for good. When will the house be sold? I asked, my voice trembling. The process will take about 3 months. It will be put on the market, a buyer will be found, and when the sale closes, you will each receive your share. We estimate your portion will be approximately $220,000, considering the current market value and the mortgage payments your son made. Nearly $250,000. Enough to buy a small condo of my own. Enough for security. Enough to live out my final years with dignity. Thank you, Mr. Morales, for everything. Thank you for trusting me. And Mrs. Miller, allow me to say something. I have handled many family dispute cases in my 20-year career, and I have never, ever seen someone maintain such dignity in the midst of so much pain as you have. Your son lost much more than a house. He lost an extraordinary mother. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. From that horrible night at the restaurant to this moment. How much had changed. How much I had grown. The next day, Friday, I received an unexpected call. It was Tommy. Grandma, can I see you? I need to talk to you. Of course, sweetheart. Where? At Zilker Park? Sunday afternoon? Mom and Dad are going out. I can sneak away for a bit. I'll be there. Sunday arrived with a perfect blue sky. I sat on our agreed-upon bench at 3 o'clock. Tommy appeared 10 minutes later, running and looking over his shoulder as if he were afraid of being followed. He sat next to me, panting. Thanks for coming, Grandma. I will always come when you need me, Tommy. I know what happened. I heard Mom and Dad fighting. Dad is in a bad way. He cries all the time. He says he ruined everything, that he lost the only thing that really mattered. My heart ached. And your mom? Mom is just angry. She says you betrayed us. But I don't believe that, Grandma. I know they treated you badly. I saw it all and I did nothing. And I feel so bad about it. Tommy, look at me. You were a child. You're still a child. It wasn't your job to protect me. But I could have said something. I could have... No. Adults have to solve adult problems. You just need to grow up and be better than us. Be better than your dad. Be better than me. You didn't do anything wrong, Grandma. I did one thing wrong, sweetheart. I allowed them to treat me badly for years. I taught them with my silence that it was okay to disrespect me. That was my mistake. And I don't want you to make the same one. Tommy was quiet, processing my words. Are you ever coming back? Not to that house. That house doesn't exist for me anymore. But Tommy, when you're older, when you can make your own decisions, my door will always be open for you. Always. Promise you won't forget me? I promise. A grandmother's love doesn't get forgotten. It might go dormant. It might hide. But it never disappears. I hugged him tightly, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, memorizing the moment. Then I let him go. Go on, before they miss you. And Tommy, study hard. Read. Become a good man. That will be the best way to honor me. I watched him run off, turning once to wave goodbye. I waved back, tears streaming down my face but a smile on my lips. Not everything was lost. There was still love. There was still hope. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new apartment. It was small, barely 500 square feet in a modest but clean building near downtown Austin. It had 1 bedroom, a living dining area, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. All mine. Ryan helped me move, along with a few teachers from the foundation who insisted on helping. Together, we painted the walls a soft yellow that reminded me of the sunflowers Robert used to give me. I bought simple but new furniture, a bed that didn't creak, a mint green sofa, A small dining table, white curtains that let the light stream in, potted plants that I promised to care for. On the night of my first dinner in my own apartment, I made something simple: vegetable soup and toast. I set the table as if for a special occasion, with an embroidered tablecloth my mother had given me years ago that I had managed to save. I sat alone in front of my steaming bowl and raised my glass of water as if in a toast. To you, Robert, for teaching me that I deserved true love, for the letters that reminded me who I was before I got lost, and for giving me a son who, even though he hurt me, finally taught me how to value myself. I drank slowly, savoring the moment. The silence of my apartment wasn't the cruel silence of being ignored. It was the peaceful silence of being at peace with myself. A month later, the house sold. A young family bought it, excited for their first home. On the day of the closing, I had to go to the title company's office. Julian was there, signing his side of the paperwork. We looked at each other for the first time in months. He looked different, thinner, older, defeated. When we finished signing, he approached me as I was putting my copy of the documents away. "Mom, Dorothy," I corrected him gently. "Call me Dorothy." His face fell. "Dorothy, I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. The way I treated you, the lies, the fraud, everything. I know. Do you forgive me?" The question hung between us like a broken bridge. Someday, Julian. Someday I might be able to forgive, but not today. Today I'm still healing. Today I'm still learning how to live without the weight of being invisible. Give me time. How much time? I don't know. Maybe years. Maybe never. But that is something you will have to accept as a consequence of your choices. And the kids? Tommy and Jenna? Your children can always find me when they are ready, but on their own terms, not yours. They are not weapons or bridges. They are people who deserve to choose. Julian nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. I loved you, you know. I still love you. You're my mom, and you are my son. That will never change. But love isn't enough when it isn't accompanied by respect. And you disrespected me in the worst ways possible. If I could go back in time? But you can't. No one can. We can only decide what we do with the time we have left. I walked away without saying goodbye. Some conversations don't have neat endings. Some wounds don't close with pretty words. I left the title company with my check in my hand, $227,000. The price of my freedom, the tangible value of my reclaimed dignity. That afternoon, I opened a savings account in my name only. I deposited most of the money. With the rest, I allowed myself a luxury I'd never been able to afford. I walked into a bookstore and bought every book that caught my eye. 8 new books that smelled of fresh ink and infinite possibilities. I arrived at my apartment carrying my bag of books as if they were treasure. Because they were. They were time for myself. They were nights of reading without interruption. They were pleasure without guilt. I made tea, sat on my mint green sofa, opened the first book, and read until the sun went down and shadows filled my small apartment. And for the first time in decades, I didn't get up to turn on a light because someone else needed it. I stayed in the comfortable darkness, feeling something inside me finally come to rest, finally heal, finally be free.